Wait, 2021's already over? Really? It only feels like we're 6 months into it. I'm being serious when I say that 2021 felt like it just walked out, not long after it walked in. I'm having a much easier time remembering things that happened during it from both a personal and world perspective. It's quite odd. And since this year was more so my step into actually getting a job in the real world, as someone fresh out of college, I will admit that the games I got this year were fewer and farther between. In fact, the amount of games released to the first half of 2021 that I was interested in was way smaller. Which is understandable in hindsight considering the virus is still out there, but I slowly got more and more coming in, and well, here we are now. Don't think I should be saying this, but I'm not counting expansions to any games from previous years, or remasters of games that I played on previous consoles, which is unfortunate in Sonic Colors Ultimate's case. I'll try and find the chance to talk about it another day. Anyways, time to get the show on the road. I will shamefully admit that I jumped into Mario Party just recently. Throughout all this time, I've heard about its tendency to drive wedges into friendships, and the games that were available on the consoles that I've owned are generally considered some of the weaker entries in the series. And as time went on, I was attracted to other subdivisions of Mario. But then we cut to 2021, where I got Mario Party Superstars. Glad I did, because despite everything I've heard, the core of the game is honestly tons of fun. I love how each board has something to spice up progression via rolling the dice, and it feels great to get to a space that you want to get at and mess with the other players. Or kick the AI while it's already down if you want to go that far. The minigames easily take the cake for me though. There's loads of them, and they're all a really fun time. For the most part. Some can even get really chaotic, like one wrong move could instantly knock you out, and adrenaline pumping with how some of them build off simple ideas. There's even a mode that lets you cut straight to the minigames if you want to try them out, or you just want to have fun with them, and that even has modes that can give you sets with different stipulations. I'll admit, this is more of a game that I think you'll get loads more mileage out of if you've got friends to play with, local or online. But the fact that the game does give you those choices, with a lot of variety, might sound really enticing if you want to pick this game up. Really, if you're curious about this series, or you just like board games or minigame compilations, this is an easy game to consider. Not a whole lot to say, but for this series, do you need anything else for me to say? Continuing the shameless admitting to something, I never played the first chapter of Toby Fox's new project, Deltarune, when it first came out in 2018. I don't know, nothing about it hooked me at that time, and what I heard about it was that it felt like a chapter 1. When I did play it though, everything I did hear about it was true. But I still enjoyed it regardless, especially the development of Susie and the continuation of Toby Fox's weird ideas. But the reason why I picked it up when I did was because the second chapter came out in 2021 and got much more of a buzz on social media. So I went in to check it out. And I made the right choice. With both chapters playing similarly to each other, and with both taking the basis of what Undertale introduced for enemy encounters, you know, getting to know each monster and sparing them, I like how Deltarune expands on this. All of your party members can spare enemies like you, as well as provide extra moments to get enemies into a state where they can be spared, which adds more strategy and makes encounters more fun as a result. While this does apply to both chapters, Chapter 2 has a lot more going for it. The cyberworld as a central location is creative with the amount of crazy puzzles and set pieces it has, along with how much I really enjoy the aesthetic. All the characters that inhabit it just add to Deltarune's already crazy cast, with some actually having dilemmas that are interesting to learn about, and some meaning a good compromise between bizarre and entertaining. The only word I can use to describe Queen is potassium. In fact, the writing in general is a lot tighter. There's lots of moments that completely cracked me up, and moments where I feel like I had a chance to understand someone, which is something I always love seeing. Deltarune Chapter 2 goes so much deeper with what the entire adventure is aiming for, and on its own, it's just an immensely fun experience overall. Only problem is that now I have to join everyone on the wait train for Chapter 3. Ah well, I'll just find some potassium to tide myself over. I found some good potassium. I'm really happy console video games based off Marvel Comics properties are becoming more common nowadays. Sure, we did get some earlier in the 2010s, but with how big superheroes are now, thanks to things like the MCU, I can really appreciate some devs actually wanting to do their own take on a character or a group of characters. Spider-Man 2018 was amazing, Miles Morales was awesome, Avengers 2020 was awesome, and I'm very much looking forward to Insomniac's Wolverine and Spider-Man 2. But in 2021, they decided to give a game to the Guardians of the Galaxy. And yes, it's awesome. As someone who only became a fan of these characters via the MCU films, I was more than happy to see them follow suit in terms of getting their own game. While sure, you're only in control of Star-Lord from beginning to end, what they do with him and how they integrate the rest of the Guardians is really clever. Star-Lord does get several elemental attributes to his guns, which are immensely handy for encounters, and you can issue instructions to the rest of your team to lay on the extra damage. They also get a lot more moves as you go along the game, some of which are of the supportive type, so combined with the large enemy variety, there's a ton of strategy for every encounter and for every boss, the latter of which really tests what you've learned at these, and have some puzzle elements, which are a really nice change of pace. But they also implement a lot of this into world traversal, as some paths can only be accessed via a certain team member or a certain element, and there's actual puzzles that get the brain ticking. They could have stopped there and I'd be satisfied, but they also chose to implement an actually really engaging story with it. I was surprised just how much they were willing to go with these versions of the Guardians, as well as various other characters connected to them, and how high the stakes were raised thanks to the involvement of what's basically a god and a cult following he has. Heck, they went as far as having some choices you make actually affect how some scenarios somewhere else within the game play out. Granted, it leads to the same conclusion, with the exception of one, but it's an effort I can respect, just like the rest of the game. I'm really happy to see these heroes represented in a game format on their own, and the game they got is certainly a good one. Also, this game can rickroll you. Rickrolling as a meme will never die. I may have been late to the Persona 5 train, but I love Persona 5 Royal so much that I am perfectly happy with what they want to do with these characters in subsequent appearances. We may have gotten some standard things for them, like a dancing game and some appearances and crossovers, but someone at Atlas decided to collaborate with Koei Tecmo and let the Fan of Thieves go nuts on legions of foes in a warrior-style game. But they went even further and decided to make Persona 5 Strikers an actual sequel to the original Persona 5, story-wise. While the gameplay in the real world is a lot simpler here than the original P5 and Royal, I found it to be all worth including thanks to the character interactions. All of the returning Fan of Thieves get a lot more to bounce off each other with, especially with them essentially taking a road trip across Japan. But the new characters they introduce really breathe even more life into the story. The villains are all really enjoyable and do have a legit presence about them, and the new good guys all have incredibly likable qualities and are welcome additions to the team. Sophia is a precious cinnamon roll who deserves all the praise she gets, and Zenkichi is more proof that Persona has some really cool dads. Also, whoever gave him his Fan of Thief identity and persona loves Hugh Jackman. You cannot convince me otherwise. But the game chooses to spend more time in combat within the new jails in the metaverse, and you'd be shocked just how much this game decides to take influences from action RPGs rather than Warriors games. Sure, the enemy mobs are there, as well as generals who take longer, but the stronger ones have elemental and weapon weaknesses, which you can use to perform stronger attacks against if you get them into that state. Some of these elemental attacks are on your strong attack button, and you have a pop-up menu to perform some of these on the fly. There is a lot more strategy here than your typical Warriors game, and you'd be surprised just how much knowledge of JRPGs will help you more than knowledge of Musou. The fact that this game is coming off the heels of one of the most critically acclaimed JRPGs within the last few years was already pretty daunting, but Strikers has so much about it that makes it feel new. If you want to make a fun little side story connected to a famous game, this is sure how you do it. With all that I've learned about game development and the ideas that can go into it so far, I've garnered an appreciation for game directors that make odd decisions and make their games stand out as best as possible, and Suda51 is one director I've come to respect in this department. I've always enjoyed how his games try to be as out there as they can be in terms of style and tone, with how many media genres and tropes they satirize or even commentate on top of just being really entertaining. And when he hits that mark, we get things like No More Heroes 3. I'm glad I got the chance to become a fan of No More Heroes when I did, because it allowed me to become super excited for No More Heroes 3, and when I got it, I was completely enamored with it. Combat's at its absolute best here, nailing a great compromise between the use of light and heavy attacks, as well as making suplexes and finishers feel super satisfying, but the death chips add an extra layer to it all, making each and every encounter more diverse. I always love seeking out fights I don't need to partake in, because of just how fun they can get. And with this being No More Heroes, the bosses are undoubtedly the highlight of the game. They're big, they're fast-paced, they're challenging, and they're an absolute blast to fight. But more about the weird choices. Let me put it this way, if I showed you some of this stuff out of context, you would probably be horribly confused. This is a game that lets you pretty much break every rule of the road known to man just to make your way over to mow some grass. You can partake in battles in a mech suit and then do something like plunge a toilet or collect trash in alligator-infested territory only a few minutes later, and one of the bosses has a phase that's literally a game of musical chairs. Oh, and did I mention the story overall pays tribute to a lot of modern day films, especially superhero blockbusters, and a lot of classic films and classic anime alike? Yeah, this game is completely bonkers in terms of tone and style, but that's precisely why I love it. It's a really fun game that is completely cloaked in whatever Suda51 wants to do. Sure, it could run a lot better, and there's a few things that could use a few touch-ups, but for a Suda game and a No More Heroes game, it knocked my expectations out of the park. Pokemon Leaf Green may have been my first ever Pokemon game, but Pokemon Diamond was my first completely original entry in the series. Nowadays I probably won't go back to it when the superior Platinum exists, but at the time, it did a great job introducing me to what else the series offered beyond just Kanto, and I still have fond memories of it. And those memories happily returned to me once Ilka stepped up to the plate and delivered a great modern rendition. This may not be my favorite remake in this series, but Pokemon Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl did everything they needed to do in order to provide a fresh new take on a Sinnoh adventure. Minus making Gliscor accessible during the main story normally. Game Freak, please stop treating him so badly. Several impediments that made the original Diamond Pearl more restrictive have either been altered or outright removed. HMs now being in this Poketchup is probably the best change out of all of them, because you can now use them to progress and still carry your intended team, which is the exact blessing I wanted. But they also did things like add these Emporiums in the underground to have more Pokemon you can't find anywhere else, meaning you have more options for your team. It's also great to see the underground in general get reworked, including having some amazing TMs available to you, smaller things like having your Pokemon walk alongside you like in Heart Gold Soul Silver and the Sword and Shield expansions, and some areas being faster in general are also welcome, and a lot of bosses have been reworked to include some strategies you'd see in competitive play, especially late game ones and post game ones. This game has plenty of challenges, which I found very much welcome, and everything that was good about the original Gen 4 was kept intact. Granted, there are parts where the game does inherit some of the original's problems, and there are a few areas that can be polished more, but I'm really happy with how these games recreated a generation I grew up with. I personally do prefer Platinum, but it's more so due to things I like rather than the technical aspects. Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl are probably the most ideal way to experience Sinnoh nowadays, and I'm glad we have a new generation to appreciate it. Here's hoping Pokemon Legends Arceus delivers. Heck, it might even be in my hand when this video comes out. And it is! As unfortunate as it is, I was not able to play Tales of Arise in time for it to qualify for this list. Granted, I overall enjoyed when I played the demo, and even got the game last Christmas, but due to this one thing called life, it's sadly out. And the reason why I didn't choose to get it day one, despite Tales being one of my favorite video game franchises, was because there was a Namco RPG that was winning me over more. I am genuinely surprised that this ended up at this spot, because each update looked promising, and its setting and gameplay were 100% my thing. I even did a demo impressions on it saying it was living up to my expectations. But number 4 is still a very commendable spot. So with that said, Scarlet Nexus was worth the hype. Everything about the combat system just clicks, with the game instantaneously using Psychokinesis and your melee weapon in conjunction with one another to keep combos going, and using SES to identify enemy weaknesses to get their stun meter down. Not every enemy is handled the same way, as some require proper use of your resources in order to easily take down, but figuring that part out leads to combat that is very fast and very rewarding. All of it just flows naturally, and the upgrades you get as you level up open several ways to approach fights. I even undersold some moves in my demo impressions. Let that speak volumes for how fun and elegant this combat system is. Still not keen on how Brain Drive activates, but what can you do? It all gets to a point where I would actively seek out fights, even when I really did not need to. And I love how this game's bosses take things a step further, as each one challenges you beyond just using X skill or X SAS, and then the boss is stunned. Regardless if they're large and in charge or on your level, they will require a lot more attention and reaction than just playing rock, paper, scissors. I was also seriously not expecting the story this game ended up with, despite some of my assumptions being correct. There is an end goal and some truths to be discovered, but what I like about how it was handled was that the game showed that maybe this world isn't as black and white as you might think. All sides of this conflict are corrupted in one form or another, and it does make the central focus of the plot more interesting with how each character is tested and with the themes presented. There's plenty of moments I wasn't expecting to get, and several moments where I admittedly felt bad for someone. Won't say who, but let's just say there's a large number of people who get screwed in the worst ways. It's also a plot that implements time travel in a decently clever way. And since I was already getting a lot out of these characters, with personal highlights easily going to Yuito, Kasane, Hanabi, Tsugumi, Arashi, Kyoka, and Kagero, I really like how this game takes a breath and lets you connect with them through their Bond episodes, which gives you both more character and more game, and even provides boons for combat. I also really like how stylized the art direction is, despite sharing a few things with other Namco anime titles, and I've actually grown accustomed to how the still images and character portraits were handled, as they help tell the story in an interesting way and are in real time, meaning what you are wearing will reflect in that cutscene. I've also grown on the soundtrack. The voice acting is top notch. The game will no doubt keep you busy regardless if you're playing one campaign or both, or choose to go to New Game Plus. I'm just really happy with how Scarlet Nexus turned out, and I would absolutely love to see a follow-up in the future if one is being planned. Go give this game a shot. It's one heck of a ride. While I was at least listening to the status of a lot of releases from larger companies, I didn't give as much attention to the indie scene as I would have liked. I kept up with some of the indie worlds with the Nintendo, don't get me wrong, but in terms of indie news beyond that, I was drawing a blank. Not helped by the fact that I didn't get most of what they showed off. But upon closer inspection, I discovered that 2021 was actually pretty prosperous for indie titles. I heard about what people thought about several ones that were released last year, which led to me getting a couple soon enough. But even if I got more than what I did, I sincerely doubt I would be as infatuated with them as I was with Chicory: A Colorful Tale. I am legitimately surprised that I haven't seen that many people talk about this game, because from what I read about the description to when I got to the last frame of the game, I was legit in awe with how the developers made something so sweet. The fact that this was an adventure game that had a setting in a coloring book-esque style Fantasyland, where everything is named after food, and you can paint on anything, engaged me right off the bat. But when I played it, I was shocked with how much freedom you had with the brush. It's active at all times, even in cutscenes, and the title screen, and you can basically use it to draw or color basically anything you want. And yes, it is as amazing and amusing as it sounds. There's even some parts of the game where you can basically draw anything on a canvas, and to successfully draw something that exudes joy, I drew Spider-Man, because if Spider-Man does not express joy to you, then I don't know what to tell you. But the brush is even more important to the game than that. It's not just the key to puzzles in this game, or something you use to combat some really well thought out boss battles, as well as board progression and the thing that extends your abilities the more you bond with it. It's also probably the most important thing in this plot. The plot itself aims to speak more to the player on a more personal level, focusing on self-confidence and self-creativity. There is a lot of focus on how characters are feeling, and it's not afraid to show you just how much these emotions can really hurt you. There are some downright unsettling and depressing moments, but they all feel organic and remain honest to the theme. Nothing is as easy as it seems here. As someone who can really get overwhelmed by certain situations and doubtful of my own ability to perform tasks, I was really into the story, and I actually got choked up at points because it was genuine with the point it wanted to tell. The entire game feels genuine. It lets you have total freedom with what you want to do. It does not try to pile content on top of you. In fact, the amount it gives you to do for 100% completion feels just right. And it feels like it was made by people who wanted to express a message they wanted to tell. Because of that, I think literally anyone can enjoy this game. In the simplest terms, this game is pure art. And it's funny that I'm saying that considering we're only at number 3. Guess that's how things roll sometimes. With how much getting a PS5 or an Xbox Series X still seems to be a process and a half, even to this day, I'm very happy I was able to get my PS5. I love playing a lot of games I already own on PS4 with better performance, and a lot of the games that it's currently getting have shown promise. But out of all the reasons, the one game that completely sold me on this console was Ratchet & Clank Rift Apart. And it turned out to be outstanding! As someone who has had this itch for a while, Rift Apart delivered everything I wanted out of a continuation of this series. All the new weapons and gadgets are a blast to use, and they act as a great accompaniment with how buttery smooth Ratchet and Rivet feel to control. Fight sequences always remain dynamic and fun, as the game always finds a set piece to diversify things. The set pieces each world has make them feel completely distinct from one another, and I really do appreciate how some of them feel more vast and open. The pocket dimensions feel like more traditional platforming challenges, which are a really nice change of pace, and the extra gameplay styles like these hacking minigames that place you in control of a little spider robot, or the well thought out puzzles with Clank, also bring variety without feeling out of place. The game also has a well thought out story that not only gives new arcs and moments to already established characters, but also manages to introduce new ones that help give life to the narrative. Rivet in particular doesn't feel like a carbon copy of Ratchet, despite her being in Ratchet's role in her own dimension. There's genuinely a ton of things to appreciate about her, from her overall charm to development. This is pretty much her story, and I can't wait to see more of her in the future. And for one more thing, I am also impressed with how this game utilizes the PS5's hardware near flawlessly. The game can easily load in arena challenges and even entire environments just like that, and there's plenty of attributes that use things like the adaptive triggers. For as admirable as this is, it acts as an accomplice to a fantastic entry in the Ratchet & Clank series. Instead of it being shoved in your face with little substance, it wants to show you the new tech, but it also wants to give you a really fun game that gives you incentive to come back several times over. And all this combined with the extra details and love put into it, I can easily see myself coming back to Rift Apart, and I can easily see it being a system seller. I don't have very many honorable mentions, since I admit I didn't get a ton of games this year, so here's the couple I did get. Kaze and the Wild Mess. Pretty fun 2D platformer that has some really neat challenges. Not much else, but that's fine with me. Deathloop. This was pretty much the last second shoe-in, but from what I played, it's really good. Bowser's Fury, a solid basis for what could potentially be a fantastic 3D Mario game. That's it. I keep on saying that I have a hard time narrowing these kinds of lists down, but in this case, I was stumped on the top 4 since my experience with all the games on these spots has reached up to the same bar of amazing. For different reasons, sure, but no matter what I thought about, there were so few orders I actually felt comfortable with. But then I realized, the answer can be found within the dread. I was legitimately blown away when Nintendo just came out at E3 2021 and said that they were making a brand new 2D Metroid game for the Switch that was going to come out 4 months afterwards. And with all the marketing it got prior to launch, it seemed like Nintendo was on board with the series making a giant resurgence. Sure, we had Samus Returns on the 3DS, which did get the public eye interested despite it not selling that well, and we have yet to see what has become of Prime 4, but just the fact that there was a new 2D Metroid game coming out after nearly 20 years after the last fully original one was nothing short of glorious. And when the time came, Metroid Dread absolutely delivered everything it promised. The game feels like Rigorous Team actively used the feedback Samus Returns got as a way to improve what they knew about Metroid, and took notes from other titles in the series, leading to the end result just feeling right. The melee counter is way more useful and way more fun to pull off, and the new additions to Samus' arsenal and the controls that feel near perfect make traversal and boss encounters even more fun to perform. But to compensate for that, enemy encounters and bosses are much more challenging through their attack speed, through their damage output, and through their patterns. Even if it was an encounter that killed me a few times over, I felt constantly rewarded for deciphering their patterns and defeating each foe in a really stylish or really quick manner, or later on, trivializing some enemies with certain upgrades. It never gets old. The world design nails a perfect compromise for those who want a more streamlined adventure, and those who want a sequence break and get items out of the intended order, on top of providing some immensely smart puzzles, some of which requiring pinpoint reaction time with things like the Speed Booster and the Shine Spark. On top of all that design, the atmosphere of Planet ZDR is incredibly strong at evoking a feeling of isolation that the franchise is known for, and has several environments that make every section of it feel refreshing, even when revisiting them for new areas and items you might have missed, or if you're venturing into territory with an enemy lurking about. The encounters with these things were always nerve-wracking. Their powers diversify each encounter, and they can just game over you right there if you're not being careful. But pairing out of them, and eventually getting the only means to beat them, and then using it, is a wonderful means of catharsis I never tire of. In fact, with the playthroughs I've done of this game, I never really got tired of anything. Everything about Metroid Dread just feels wonderful. From the way Samus handles, to the feeling of getting something new, to triumphing over particularly hard opponents. Even when I messed up a puzzle or got Emmy'd again, I just wanted to keep playing this game, even from the very beginning. And that's a sign that Nintendo and Mercury Steam absolutely scored a massive home run with this one. Metroid Dread is nothing short of an exemplary game, and with all the recognition it's getting, I feel confident in saying that Metroid is officially back, and I could not be more overjoyed to say that. I am the Lightning Ripper, and welcome back, faithful bounty hunter. We missed you very much. I'll see you all next time.